Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdka Steve, and today I'm joined by Danny Bell, a friend of mine that I actually got to meet in person a few years back when Nerdarchy went out to California, out to LA to be on Geek and Sundry. We actually crashed his birthday party with Satine Phoenix, which was a blast, and that was the first time we met. And we've been talking online ever since. You've been on the show before. You've written some books that I've read. I'm up to date except for the last one so far, which is
Which
next
you
on my.
have though.
I do, yes, I do have. Now I just have to get off my ass and read it or listen to it in this case. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
So the series that you're writing is the Black Pages novels. Do you
hmm
want to kind of like give us the elevator pitch and tell us about that a little bit? Maybe even how maybe playing D&D and being a gamer inspired you, if it did or if it didn't.
Yeah, D&D has definitely inspired me in a number of ways, especially with writing. The elevator pitch for the books, though, I will say, is it is about this young woman who has social anxiety, and she has the power to make herself fictional. So she can leave this world and jump into books or movies or TV shows or comic books. And kind of the twist comes when she realizes that those worlds are equally as real as her own. And she starts trying to save all the nameless characters that usually die with lives ruined, for the sake of advancing the plot.
So I feel like, or I don't feel like it is like it's a fun premise because you get to jump through all these different stories and in essence like you're not locked into any one particular genre. Like it's written basically from urban fantasy kind of, but because the nature of the character and what happens in the story, it doesn't have to stay there.
Yeah, exactly. And the urban fantasy thing is something that's always heavily appealed to me because I love the idea of magic, and but I live in this world. I live in LA. I'm an LA native, and you know escapist fantasy is always great. Reading Lord of the Rings is fantastic. Going to another world is great too. But there's something special about imagining it here. Like, even something simple as like, what if Bigfoot really existed? Like, just it'd be great, right? You want that tiny bit of wonder. And so urban fantasy has always been a favorite genre of mine just because there's something cool about going, what if magic just had never really died? What if it's still out there? What if it's maybe even a little bit hidden, but, there's still some magic and thus maybe some hope in the world?
So I was a super hard sell when it came to urban fantasy. Eventually, I got on board, but I came kicking and screaming. It took me a long time. Ted kept going. You got to read this book. You got to read this book. You got to read this book, and that was the Dresden Files series. And he was on me for like years before I finally said, "All right, I'll check it out." Um, and I'm so glad I did. For one, it was just a great series, but it's also opened up like that genre to me now. And then also, it was like probably like the beginning of I got to this point where I've read so much fantasy novels. I'm like, I just need something else. I need to absorb something different than fantasy for a while. So I was been so I was reading that, and I went on like a steampunk kick for a while. There was a bunch of different series that I have read. And so now, but nowadays it's terrible because I keep complaining about this to people. It's like I have to figure out how to get back into reading because I used to read all the time, and reading for pleasure now is so hard. Do you find as someone who's writing, you know, has a full time gig, has hobbies, do you find there any problems with that kind of stuff as well? Like you just need to get away from the word.
I mean, on occasion, yes, and I think that for me, like I go in cycles. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have times where there'll be months where I don't watch any TV or I don't read anything. I just don't have the time. I'm not doing it. But then there are times where I'll set aside. Like right now, I'm in the middle of like a consumption cycle because like I just finished. I finished writing one of the books. It's with the editor right now, and until that book is fully completed and ready to go out to shelves and everything, and I start. I've already done some work, but until I start hardcore writing the next one, this is like the phase where I'm reading a lot and I'm listening to audiobooks while I'm driving or walking, or I'm, analyzing movies. I'm doing, doing my film analysis. I'm doing whatever I'm doing is like I have like this season, so to speak, of like binge read, binge watch, do all that stuff, and then it'll go away again for a little while and it'll come back. And it's helpful because I think that while it's always good to be in the habit of reading every day and writing every day, and that's usually the advice you get, I think that, once you set yourself down to it and you put yourself in the mood of like, I'm doing this for now, but not forever, it makes the time that you spend doing with it, I think, a little more special.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We're speaking of consumption, I've been doing this thing over the last couple of weeks where like one night a week I make my family sit down with me and watch like an older movie. Like we've done Willow, Time Bandits, and my kids absolutely hate it. And next up is Legend. And
That's good.
yeah, well, like I keep thinking like I'll find something that'll stick, but like I think the biggest problem is the movies from those time periods. Like the pacing is so different for them, and I don't know that we necessarily think about it. Just having like grown up through it and through the evolution of storytelling. But when I try and make them watch that stuff, they're just like, "Oh God, Dad, this is terrible." And my son
Maybe
calls everything graphics. He's an adult, mind you, but
graphics is funny.
yeah,
I have maybe a suggestion for you, if I may, from a pacing perspective, but also along the lines of the fantasy things, like something that is notable for its pacing being far different. Is the movie Kroll? You've seen that, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that was. If you remember that movie, like I saw it when I was a little kid. That movie is basically a cartoon with just action, 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 action. And if you want to like maybe hold their attention, that might be a good one for them.
I will definitely put it on the list. Yeah, I'm trying to go through like the big ones from the '80s that I really enjoyed. And so far they have not held up that well for them, but that's all right. We'll keep plugging away and trying. And besides, during apocalypse, what better do I have to do than torture my children with old movies?
I mean, yeah. I mean, like I would. It's sad that the kids think Time Bandits and Willow is torture. Those are
Yeah,
good movies.
yeah. You know what though? Going and watching them again, I can see why. Like I can see like how things just progress slower in those movies. Uh, but then again, we live through it, so we can. It's easier, I guess, for us to like sink into the nostalgia and understand like the period. So I think that helps even going back and watching it. So they're still like good movies, but for them, they only know like the pace that they're living through now. Which, like we were even talking about this a little bit, before we went live, is everything is right there at your fingertips. You don't wait for anything. It's just like, whatever you want, you just get it. Where we like pacing was an issue for us because we had Saturday mornings for cartoons. That was the only day of the week for the longest time. And if you missed that one show that you waited all week for, you just missed it.
You just didn't get to see it again. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny too. 'Cause I think that's part of it. Is like, I remember like when I was a little kid. If you found a movie to bring home, right? Say for example, even like you went out and you managed to get a DVD of something, whatever it might be, or VHS if you want to go when I was like 5. What ended up happening is you had that movie. You didn't have every movie. You didn't have the whole internet. You didn't have Hulu or Netflix, and so it's something that I thought of while you were saying that is I can't imagine like a 10-year-old today getting into Blade Runner. But when I was a kid, Blade Runner was amazing, but I was able to sit with it. But if you think about it, the pacing of Blade Runner is very slow. And that is like the kind of thing that like it would be a really special, weird kid at 10 years old today to love Blade Runner.
Yeah.
It's not like it was back then.
Yeah, well, now they just take it for granted, so it's easy. So, are you involved in any D&D games currently?
I'm writing one that I want to play with some friends. it's an original story of mine. But the games that I was playing before quarantine all kind of got canceled for obvious reasons, and so yeah, it's been a little sad. I haven't had any games to play lately. But I've
So
also, to be fair, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say, so have you guys considered moving them online?
So we actually had one. A friend of mine who I think you know as well, Matt Altman, was the DM for one of my games, and he apparently was like in another game on the same day, and just his schedule got blown up. So since he was the DM for that game, he kind of like let it sit to the side. So yeah, the games that I had going, it's just like it's been a scheduling thing. Weirdly enough, you think that everybody would be available, but like there are other games, and I also haven't sought one out yet because I was doing a lot of writing until very recently. So there wasn't like new games that I was trying to find, but now that I have the time again, I'm actually writing one I'm actually going to try to DM it and try to get friends in.
Yeah, so it's I during these times it just seems like everyone is either playing way more, or it's like cut off nothing. It's, but I feel like have you played any games online?
Uh, Back in the day, I used to do the D&D and the forum games,
Mm-hmm.
like the text games, like in the big forums. We used to do that. I've never played a game online like with Zoom or anything. When I finally do it with the game that I'm writing, it'll be the first time I've done it. I've never played online like that.
Yeah, I mean it's a different experience, but it's got its pros and its cons. But it's better than not playing. That you like that's the first thing. But then I find like playing online, you condense your game time. So like I feel like people are far more focused on playing the game, so you get more of the game done. But you get less of the social elements of the game than you would if you were in person and like you're hanging out with your group of friends.
Yeah, there's something that I mean, obviously, the whole experience of sitting around a table with all your friends, someone brings pizza, you all just hang out, laugh. That's always a lot of fun. I am interested in playing online, in a Zoom game or whatever, but I just haven't done it yet. But it'll be fun to do. I think I'm looking forward to the experience.
Yeah, I was super happy when D&D Beyond added dice because we use that for a lot of different things. So now you can pull up your D&D Beyond character, and if you have the dice active on it, like anything that you would roll is just a click on your character sheet, and it rolls the D&D Beyond dice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I know some people, I know a lot of people like to roll real dice. Yeah, Ted will usually just roll dice, but I don't know. I usually use whatever the medium is I'm at. So if I'm in person, I use dice. If I'm online, I use virtual dice. Plus, the
Yeah,
biggest thing is I usually just forget them in some other part of my house anyway.
I always have. It's just funny you said that, and I started saying what I was going to say. I look to my right a little bit, and there's a big bag of dice like right next to me. I always have dice handy in the home for no reason. They just happen to be there.
Yeah.
I think that when I run my game, I want to. I'm gonna let everyone just like do their rolls and just tell me. I don't think anyone. I don't think people really fudge their dice. I don't think it's not a concern. If I can't see what they rolled. I think D&D is very much a game about rolling dice. That's the fun part, the randomness of it. I have this idea. Let's see if it works. So I think that the click is fun, but I think it takes away a small element. I want people to be able to roll if they want to roll.
Oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Um, and that matter of fact, no one else can see it on D&D Beyond. Like it's on your character sheet, so no one else sees the rolls anyway. But so talking to Adam Bradford though, they're gonna eventually have like skins and stuff, or you can have dice. You can have virtual dice that you could never have in the real world, just because of physics and stuff. Like dice that are filled with water or filled with whatever. Or you could have weird effects happen when you roll dice. So I'm kind of excited for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I think it reminds me of like the deck of many.
Yeah,
You remember that? Like with the when like all the effects and the cards and everything else too. I love seeing the effects of things. Like I love seeing like the visuals. Those are always a
yeah.
lot of fun.
Oh yeah, they just did another Kickstarter for tarot cards
Oh, nice.
that are like that as well, and I think they finished off the rest of the spell levels.
Mm.
Oh no,
I
it's
had,
going on now. They're like at $500,000 or something ridiculous.
oh my god, I hadn't heard about it.
Yeah, and yeah, it's probably they're probably like at the halfway point, if even that far, and they're doing really well with it. So you said you just finished up. You just finished up writing another book and sent it off. What number is that?
That is number 4, Storm Chaser. You guys actually put the you, on your website. You put the cover for that one there.
Okay.
Yeah, that one is now with the editor. I'm hoping to release it on my birthday. That'll be a fun little release date in July. And I've also done the book cover and the outline and the plotting and everything for the 5th book. I just have to sit down and actually write it now, and that'll be a lot of fun too.
So you're. I want to say you're a new author, but then I might also be wrong. Are you newish as an author?
Uh, New as a published author. So
Okay.
what my history and background was is I've been writing my entire adult life, and I wrote 6 novels before I published this first one, that were all standalones for the most part, and I did them, kind of like at the like not really to go anywhere. It was like I would write a novel and just kind of release it to the world, and it wasn't like meant to be a professional, serious thing. And then I finally sat down to this series, and those 6 books were also under pen names. I didn't put them under my own name either. In addition to that, I used to write a lot of articles. I would write short stories. I've done editing for a long time. I've written scripts. I've edited scripts. I mean, so writing is something I've been doing forever. And this is the first, big series where I'm like, this is like an actual legit thing for the world and to be printed and all of that.
So this is the most writing you've done in one kind of like world.
I would say one world, yes. Yeah, in terms of like one specific world, this is by far I would say, because even with the number of books that I've written, I'm someone who very much overwrites anyways. I write a lot of source material for myself before I sit down and write books. And with the nature of the series, which is, the character can become fictional and go to different worlds. And with copyright things, like for example, I can't have my character jump into Star Wars or Star Trek or Doctor Who, but I have or Marvel Comics. So if I want to do that stuff, I have to invent my own IPs to exist inside of that world. And then with my own nature, I write entire worlds for those worlds within the worlds. So it's something that like there is far more writing than anyone will ever see with it. And so to say that this is the most writing I've done in one world is an understatement. I think I spent the first year of my writing just coming up with all the IP stuff and all the world building stuff and just all these different things to exist in it. And that was a ton of work, but I'm glad that I have it done.
Yeah, that's really a fine line, like what you can mention and what you can't, and how you can mention it. Because, like, I know, like, in Butcher's books, one of the things that I think really kind of I connected to was, like, all the pop culture references. All right.
Yeah.
So, like, and I don't know what the legality is for that kind of stuff. Like, if it's okay to you, like, can you say Star Wars, but you can't, like, you couldn't use a Star Wars character. Like, you could talk about Star Wars. Can you even do that?
I can talk about, you can talk about Star Wars. You can say, yes, Star Wars exists. I mean, in one of the books, I made a Darth Vader joke.
Yeah.
In one of the books. So I mean, you can do that. I can't have.
You can't interact with those characters.
Yeah, you can't interact with the characters. You can't do any of that. But you can have. You can have the bit where like they exist. Like I mean, and there's a lot of pop culture references in my books as well, where where Lana will talk about Spider-Man or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or those things exist, and then the convenient bit is, well, how come she doesn't go into those worlds? Oh, because she's going into these equally valid IPs that I made up just for this. So
for fear of the mouse.
Yes, like it's like, hey, how come she jumps into all comics and not Marvel DC? well, she likes always a little bit better. It's just
Yeah.
like you get I make up my own comic book world, and it's just
So, is it starting to get hard to keep track of everything?
No, because I have it all. Well, I mean, besides just the fact that I have the things in my head, I mean that is what it is. I have it all kind of written down. Like I have all of it, and so knowing that I have like references to pull from. If I really need to go, hey, what happened there? I can go pull it up. But the other half of it too is that in part of my writing style is that I will sit down and I will plot out, since it's a 20 book series. I know where it ends. I have the ending written. I will sit down and I will say, okay, what happens in this book? What happens? And so I'll actually tell myself the story, several books out, and I know, hey, here's what happens. And then I can actually break it down by, here's the problem in this book, here's the problem in this book, here's the problem in this book. And from there, you can then break it down. I even break it down to like chapter, hey, what happens in this chapter, the next one, etc.
So you
But
have a
when you
bunch
have
of
kind of a macro,
so you have a bunch of crib notes for yourself, essentially.
yeah, and it's always good to kind of like, so if I was so inclined, I wouldn't want to, but I could sit there right now and I could tell you what the story is for the whole series. And I could say, hey, then this happens in this book, and the next book this is going to happen, the next book this is going to happen. And when you know all that up front, when you've actually kind of set yourself a roadmap, you can deviate it from a little bit. You can take a little side tour here and there. But when you kind of like know all the big beats, you know what the story is supposed to happen, you know what the themes are, you know all of that, it makes it easier to break it down into manageable chunks. So for some people, it is, the biggest chunk possible is the novel, right? Wow, how do I break this down? And for me, it's a little bit bigger. It's like, well, the biggest chunk is the series. What's the whole giant story there? Okay, now I can break it down into individual stories, and then from there I can break it down to, acts and chapters and everything else.
So how far out have you kind of figured?
Uh, uh, so I wrote the end. I know how the whole story ends. I wrote that down and put it in an envelope and I sealed it away. So I know where it ends up. In terms of total books that have been fully plotted, I think I'm fully plotted up to 8, and then after that, I have the other kind of big moments, but I don't know exactly where they fit in the book section yet. I kind of have like a vague idea, but I mean, even title wise, like the next books after this are there's Storm Chaser, then Last Shot, then By the Throat, and then Light Years and Call It in the Air. And so, like I know, like I even like know what those stories are. I'm like, hey, this happens and this happens. Just a matter now of writing them.
Nice. So, of the ones that aren't written, do you have any favorites, like where you're kind of like chomping at the bit to get to? It's like, oh, I got to get this story out of the way, so I can get get to this thing that I really want to dive into.
Oh God, yeah. Actually, I think it's funny. There's something that happened in book 4 that was one of like my most like eager to write things in the whole series, and it was something that I felt was pretty original. I hadn't seen anyone do it before in fiction, and I was like, I can't wait to write this. And the one person who's read it has been Witten, who was on the cover. Here, I'll show you her. She read it, and we're gonna talk. We're gonna have a deep dive on Friday because I always like to give her stuff first and get her notes. But she said she really liked it, and I was really excited for that. That was a big relief moment. Yeah. Outside of that, I have a moment. I think in book 8 where everything that. So one of the big themes for Alana that you'll see in the early books, and it's also a complaint I think that people get, but I don't mind because it's part of a bigger story, is that she starts off very young. She's 24 in the first book, but she gradually ages up. She ages with the series. So by the end of the series, she'll be like 40. And part of that is that, she matures as well. Part of her character is that she is a bit immature early on, and she has this very black and white morality to her, where she says, I'm doing the right thing because it's right, and if you don't do the right thing, you're wrong, and that's that. And she's the unflinching hero archetype, which is one of my favorites to write. But in a world of morally gray, complex characters, you know, it gets harder and harder to to kind of live off that and be lucky constantly and to be that unflinching. And so there's a point that I have in the series where I think I'm going to make everyone really mad or really, really shocked or whatever. But I have like one point where kind of like all of her morals are tested, where all of her ideology is tested. And I think that what she winds up doing is what nobody will see coming. And I have it planned out from like day one. And I can't wait to get there because that's the thing. That's the real turning point for the whole series. Is that early on, there's very much like this, you know, character who's trying to be heroic, but she's not really the hero, and she's not really all that strong, and she's kind of a weirdo, and she's just doing her best, and you know, she's wrong a lot, but she keeps trying, and things get harder and harder until this one point happens. And I think that once she has to deal with this one thing, that's when the whole series is flipped on its head and we get an entirely different story almost.
Yeah, and I love those moments, you know, especially in an ongoing series. And even in the the books that I've read, I've already seen like the characters grow and change. And one of my pet peeves, like I have an author that used to be one of my favorite authors, but because they have this one character that they've written, a couple dozen books about, and that character's never changed, I just stopped reading. And 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 it was weird because everything else they've written, it's like their character development is so good, and the characters all grow and change. But he's got like one character that just is like stuck, and it's his most famous character, and I find it annoying that that character just never changes.
I have a guess, but for the sake of other authors, I will not say what it is.
Yeah. So Dave wants to know: ever run games based on your works, based in the Black Pages, or when do we get to see the RPG?
You've seen a little bit of RPG in the books already, a tiny bit, like some like D&D inspired things, fantasy inspired things have popped up in there. I mean, Chal Sarda, one of the characters, is a straight up D&D character. I don't know what to say about that. I've never ran a game in my series. It's something that I've definitely thought of quite a bit. But so I will tell you kind of a deleted scene that I had for the fourth book that I took out. This is very D&D inspired. This is something that I initially had, and I was like, there's a better way to do it, so I didn't do it. But it was a matter of like, Alana was trying to explain to all of her friends the danger that they're in and the things they have to face and how they have to do it. And part of that was that she was actually running a D&D game. And she had her friends were like first level characters, and then her one elf friend, Chelsarda, was like an 11th level character, and they ended up like kind of like in like this fight, and then Chelsarda's character just books it, and they're like, this is far too high of a challenge rating, we couldn't possibly deal with this. And part of it was like, that's the point, you have to know when you can't fight, you have to know like what you have to be smart about things. And I had like this whole D&D scene where like she was kind of getting a little annoyed with her friends and trying to like, I ended up not using it, but it would have been a fun scene. I might do something with that similar later on, but
Short
that was,
story.
yeah, that short story would be a good idea. I might do that.
You kind of like elaborated on it. Go full on gamers with it.
Yeah.
That could be a lot of fun. Yeah, would you ever consider doing something with an RPG? I mean, there's plenty of generic RPGs that you could kind of like mod a little bit if you don't want to like write a full-on RPG.
Yeah, I think that if I were to run the Black Pages in a game, I think that the system that I would use either one of two. I would either use the Mutants and Masterminds 3E system, because I think you can basically do anything in that system. It's kind of like one of this big blank canvases that you just throw things against the wall and anything works. Or I would maybe try like a Fate system. Like that would probably be, I think that would work for it pretty well too.
Yeah, Fate and Cypher came to mind for me just because they're very rules light.
Yeah.
and you know the generic systems that you can do whatever else with. Mutants and Masterminds also you can do pretty much anything with, not rules light. No.
Yeah.
We played quite a bit of M&M. The third edition, actually, in each edition, it got better and better. Although I felt like second edition was a little bit better for being generic, and third edition is better at being a superheroes game than any of the previous editions.
I will tell you a very brief, funny Mutants and Mastermind story. I played. Someone tried to run. Speaking of that, they tried to run a Justice League campaign, and they were like, "Okay, we're going to play Mutants and Masterminds. Everyone's going to be like power level 10 or 11. I forget whatever it was." But they were like, "We're going to play that," and I played the Question, and I ended up having the most overpowered build out of anyone in the game with the guy with no powers, because he just had all the room for all the investigation and combat skills and just everything else. And it ended up being, I ended up having to like nerf my own character in that. It's just because he was doing, like, there'd be characters that were like, I have a secret backstory. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, look at my investigation.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm the Question.
I immediately know everything about you. And it actually, it was detrimental to the game ultimately, but it was fun. It's funny that you can do that.
Did so was that in second or in third?
That was in third.
Because in third they actually have the DC universe. So like there's 4 books, and they're all DC. For the that's actually why they launched the third edition is the 75th anniversary of DC. They were commissioned or they licensed the property to do the 4 books, and they led with that, and then they did the generic. I have
I think that ours was like we made up our own. They were
Yeah.
like, "Hey, pick a character and go for it."
Yeah, because one of the games I kind of wanted to run was like a Thunderbolt / Suicide Squad game where everyone picked I would pick I guess a power level and have everyone pick like a DC villain, and then reskin them as a hero, and like have a meta game running where everyone had to try and keep their true identity a secret. It's almost like a game within the game. I thought might be fun, and also slightly inspired by, I forget which storyline it is, where the villains are the good guys and the good guys are the villains, and and they have their alternates, and it's like, I think
You
it's
mean Earth 2?
yeah.
Yeah. The Owlman and the Crime Syndicate and all that.
Yeah, I think it was the Joker and Lex Luthor. Like the Joker sacrifices himself so Lex Luthor can escape to the whatever the prime DC universe is to get help.
Yeah, that was a Grant Morrison story. It was pretty good.
I haven't. So most of my comic book reading was all Image and Marvel, but then later on, like I really enjoy all of the animated DC stuff. Like it's like flipped. Like the Marvel animated stuff not so good. Live action stuff awesome. DC live action stuff terrible. But the animated stuff is really good.
Yeah.
With the exception of like the CW stuff that they've done has actually been pretty good as well. It's just once they get to the movies and actually have a budget, they just suck eggs for whatever reason.
I have an entire hour-long rant about that.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? Like, what Marvel does is really simple. They're like, oh, we told this story, people liked it, and it did well. We'll just do that again. DC is like, someone else gets a hold of their stuff, and they're like, we're going to change everything, and we're going to put our artistic spin on it, and they just turn it into garbage. So.
Yeah, I think even there, like, the artistic spin wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if it was in capable hands, and I think that it just hasn't been. I think that, like, one of the things that I actually did was in like occasionally I will teach writing to people, and I did a breakdown of comparable scenes in Marvel versus DC, and I was like, look, here's the same amount of screen time, here's the same general premise for a scene. Why does the Marvel scene land and why does the DC scene not land? And it's bad writing. There's bad decisions. I mean, you can like laugh at like the Clark Kent mustache thing. That's a easy thing to laugh at. But the truth is that you know they're not fun. I think first and foremost, they're not fun, and they rush to all their conclusions. And ultimately, that's what comic books were always for. They were fun. They were escapist fantasy. You wanted to go be somewhere else, and it's a shame that I think in the hands of DC, they're pushed to make things more realistic, is what makes them less enjoyable.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's more. I don't know if that's what they're pushing for, because it doesn't really feel like it. Like the only decent DC movie that's come out really is, well, Aquaman was okay. That was kind of fun. Um, Wonder Woman was really good, but all of the other ones, it's like I enjoy them, but they're just not good at being DC characters, right? It's like Marvel's artistic license is like we modernize and update the stories and characters. DC, they just do a rewrite and like piss off and piss on the fandom and just totally like abandon everything that has worked for them in the past.
I would add Shazam to your list, by the way. Shazam was really good.
Oh yes, Shazam was actually really good.
Yeah.
Um,
Shazam was basically like an '80s kids movie, a coming of age tale.
it was like, big. It was like essentially they kind of did it like big, and that's what kind of made it. Like it didn't take itself serious, and that's like a story that shouldn't.
Yeah, it's like, hey, here's a little boy who meets a wizard, and now he's a superhero. Like, don't do that too grim. Just do that what it's supposed to be, which is fun.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe one day, yeah, DC will get it and just go like, oh, we have these great stories. Why don't we just try telling one of these instead of telling a new story? Because like all the characterizations are like literally a comic book, right? Is storyboard, right? So follow. It's so simple. Like all you have to do is follow the steps they've already been laid out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's. I think that what Marvel does really well, if I can nerd out writing wise for a second,
nerd out,
is what Marvel does that's really smart is that when it comes to all of their characters, they will give them really solid arcs, start to finish. And for example, and they love their trilogies. So like when their movies come up, they always have like a beginning, middle, and end. Like for Captain America, for example, he starts off one way, and he ends in a completely different place. But the character has a full arc. The character is going through the idea of, initially it's what does it mean to be a hero? Then it goes to what does it mean to live in a world where I might not be needed? And it's just like, yeah, they do that really well. And with DC, they have no plan. They're just like, what if Batman killed people? That's not an arc. That is just like it's I don't know. They don't do that with any of their characters. None of their characters have any kind of growth. They don't really. They're caricatures. They're like, here's an avatar of Superman as opposed to here's a Superman story. And even then, I think that like, so for example, this is me. I will wrap my nerding up on this really quickly. Comparing like Captain America and Superman. So Captain America's threats are always, they're not things that, oh, what if I can't beat up this problem? His problems are always, they reflect like, they attack the idea of being an American or being what he hopes America could be. That's what his problems are in each of his three movies, right? And with Superman, if you want to make proper Superman movies, what you would do is you wouldn't say, hey, what's this problem that I can't beat up? You would say, okay, you're supposed to stand for truth, justice, the American way. The problems that he would have to deal with would be like xenophobia and racism and world hunger. And should he intervene and just, throw all the nukes into the sun? Like there'd be like a lot of like big global problems. Like, hey, you can solve these things. What are problems that you can't punch your way out of? And that would be a good. If you want to make good Superman movies, that's what you would do. But that's not. It's I don't know. They don't do that.
No, they don't. Matter of fact, like the Christopher Reeve Superman movies actually did a much better job of telling Superman's
Yeah.
story that than these big budget movies that we have now. It's so it's kind of insane. I would say Wonder Woman had a good arc, like that was pretty well done.
Yeah, Wonder Woman was good because it was, again, because it wasn't like, can Wonder Woman punch Ares? It was Wonder Woman's existential crisis is like, oh, can I solve the idea of war? Can I like get mankind to stop hating each other? And that is a good threat, because the threat is now something that, that is, this is what I'm trying to do here. So, and I don't know. Yeah, this is something I could nerd out about all day long, but it's why Wonder Woman was good where the others maybe weren't, is because of, they actually had themes, they actually had a proper story going into it.
Like I love the Aquaman animated stuff. He's
Yes.
such a cooler character there
Yeah.
than any of the movie portrayals, and even I guess even any of the comic book stuff that I've seen. I don't know why, like that, like I just wish they would take their animated series writers and just put them on a movie, and make that
Like, well,
happen.
yeah, I think that if you really wanted to like have like a good script consultant, if nothing else, you would get Paul Dini involved. I mean, he was the guy responsible for so much of the animated stuff. Um, and he also did some comic book stuff too that was really good as well. One of my all-time favorite Riddler stories, I should say, my favorite Riddler stories is a Paul Dini one, where the basic plot was Riddler realizes that, you know, as a supervillain, he kind of sucks, but if he really wants to prove that he's smarter than Batman, he will go fully legit and start advertising that he'll solve the crimes before Batman does.
Yeah.
And Batman is so concerned with the fact that Riddler must still be a bad guy that he actually gets distracted, and Riddler starts succeeding, and he starts doing the job better than Batman. And that is brilliant. I mean, but like that's a clever thing, and I think that the movies are missing cleverness. They don't really have, you know, good original thoughts or their stories, and someone like that who was so heavily involved in the first animated and then also in the comics, I think would be a perfect fit for doing live action.
Like they would have a customer and fan forever if they just took like the Justice League Unlimited series and just took inspiration from that.
Yeah.
My favorite, like Justice League series was really good, but then
Mm-hmm.
when they moved away from the actual core seven and to the Unlimited, where they're highlighting all the D-listers, it
Yeah.
was like the stories were so much better. I mean, they were already good, but they just like jumped up to the next level.
Yeah, and I think that even if you take that core story um, in Justice League Unlimited, the idea of, they're getting too big, and they're hiding something, and Question figures out that Superman is going to kill Lex Luthor, and that causes the different timeline. That whole story would be a fantastic movie or a series of movies. That'd be a great story, because especially when you get to the point of, remember like in Avengers Endgame, right, or Infinity War, when like all the heroes die, right, and we come back and we have this world that's completely changed, before they eventually come back. You have that in Justice League Unlimited, where Flash kills Lex Luthor. Sorry if I'm spoiling like a 20-year-old cartoon, by the way. I think you want to see this one. But the bit where he kills Lex Luthor and then fades out of existence, and that causes the heart of Justice League to be gone and Justice League to go all dark, and then have to have the other dimension Justice League come back and stop them, and then Flash has to survive at the end, and that actually saves the day. That is a great. You could build up to that in the same way they built it to Infinity War and Endgame. That would be a fantastic thing to build up to.
So I'm gonna real quick grab some links to put in the pinned post like I normally do, but I did not do this time, so that people can check out the Black Pages, Alana Black. But so wait, when did the original Empty Threat book come out?
Empty Threat came out in, I want to say, late 2017.
And what was your inspiration for for Empty Threat for
For
the
the whole
series
series.
Yeah. How did it
Yeah. So
start?
the inspiration actually came from, weirdly enough, Doctor Who, but not in the way that I think people would think. Uh, what happened there was I'm a big fan of Doctor Who. I've been a fan since I was 6 years old. It's my favorite show, and it's always been about optimism and hope, and and at some point I started like thinking about like all the characters that would die in those show in that series. Because I remember like there was a couple scenes where like the Doctor would get like really upset over like the death of like Amy or whatever, and I had this thought, and I was like, well, he doesn't seem to get that upset about everyone else. I was like, well, maybe I'm overreacting. And so I started going back and tried to like do the death count, and the death count got so astronomically high that I was like, oh my god. I was like, if these are all supposed to be real people, in the same way that the companions are or everyone else is, you would think that the Doctor would have a much bigger reaction to it, or would be carrying it a little bit heavier with him. And so the natural thought there was, well, what if someone could actually stop that? And I started like thinking about like every other bit of pop culture, every Monster of the Week show where someone dies in the cold open. You know, there's a scene in Miracle Man early on where like the secretary for the big bad dies, just bringing him coffee, and before she dies, like there's a little bubble. It's like her name was so and so, and she liked this band, and her boyfriend loved, and then she just gets ripped apart. And I was like, oh my god! And humanizing characters that we don't get to see is, I think, kind of a big thing. And so the idea of if you knew they were all real and you knew that their lives were just as important, just as valid as people who had the spotlight on them, what would you do if you could prevent those deaths? What would you do if you could actually step in and do something about it? And so that was kind of the original idea. And then the reason why Alana became who she was because when I started analyzing all the pop culture as well, 99% of the time it was always like the same generic straight white guy was the hero. And I was like, if someone's going to crash those stories, they have to be different. They can't necessarily be the brave, confident people. They can't necessarily be, who we expect to see. From there, I built it out.
So, essentially, right, Witten Frank has become Alana Black. How does she feel about being Alana?
So fun story I will say there. I started writing the Black Pages before I met Whit. And I spent all my savings. I was flat broke. I hadn't gone to work when I had actually, before I met Witten. And like a couple days before I met Witten, I had deleted everything I'd written because I realized it wasn't good. I had to start over. And I was legitimately having a panic attack. But I met her very randomly. I went to a birthday party that I wasn't going to go to, and she was at the birthday party not knowing anyone there. She got invited by a friend of hers who was friends with the person who was at the birthday party, and she was pulling up to the bar as her friend was like, I'm not going to make it. So she walked inside anyways for like a quick drink. I chatted with her. I spent the entire night talking to her. She was very kind, but also very much inspired the character, or at least parts of the character. And I didn't tell her. We became really good friends, and we talked a lot over the next year. But until the first book was done, I didn't tell her, hey, by the way, you very much inspired this character. I hope that's not too weird. And I was like, do you want to be on the cover? And she was like, yeah. And then I was like, oh, you're also an actress. Do you want to read the audiobooks? She was like, yeah. She's my best friend. Even without the books, she would be my best friend. She is just one of the best people. But I think she takes a lot of, I think, pride in it. She's told me it's very flattering. So that's a good thing, because it could have gone worse.
So in this case, and I put the link in the pinned post there for Amazon so you can check out Danny's work. In this case, I would actually recommend people that you look at getting the audio version over the written version. I don't know how either of that works for you, But like the audiobooks are so good, and you've got a really good group that are doing the readings. They just do such a good job. And on this book that just came out, you've got like a star-studded cast, right?
Yeah, we have it was a full cast production because we have in this series. It's kind of a weird thing where like not 100% of the books are Alana. Occasionally we go to side characters, and so in this book we had Witten obviously returned, but we also had like Mark Amir, who I think you know as well.
Yes.
Bonnie Gordon, Becca Scott was on it. Some people that you may not know, but I think are very talented, like Lauren Bancroft and Kevin Kittredge, and Joseph Limbaugh and Thomas Hamilton. Everyone did a good job. It was such a really cool thing. Actually, the audiobook just came out. And actually, here's a good question for you. I probably should have asked you before we. Sorry, I'm just bringing this to you now, but I actually have free copies to give away of all three. How can we do that for your fans?
Let's see. First three people to email me at nerdarchy@gmail.com can get the free stuff. So nerdarchy@gmail.com. You said three?
Yeah, let's do five. I'll have 5 sets for the first three, for the first 5 people that email you.
Okay, perfect. So when I check my email, I will forward them to you, Danny Bell, and you can distribute as you will. So
Very
you
good.
can check it out. But yeah, so we met Mark Muir when we did D&D in a castle. We met the library bards, which Bonnie Gordon is part of when we did the castle. We actually had quite a few interactions with Mark. He's he's been on the show as well. But he's just a super cool, regular, down to earth kind of guy. And he's also happens to be, what is it, Commander Shepard?
Yeah, he did. He's done Commander Shepard. He's also done. He's done a million things. Like
He's done a lot of things. But I feel like that's like the thing that people would know him the most from. And then and I kept calling it the wrong game because I do not video game. I kept saying Halo because he had mentioned something about Halo Con to me. So I was like, oh, it must be that, but it's not. It's the other one, whatever the other one is.
It's Mass Effect.
Mass Effect. Yeah.
See, I will share with you the story, the time how I met Mark Muir, because he's a really cool guy. I love Mark to death. But the funny story I met with him was I was actually playing a board game at my friend's house. My friend Joseph, who was also in the book, he did another voice for it, and he was like, "Hey, I'm playtesting a game. Who wants to come over and play it?" I came over and played with him, and a couple other people joined us, and Mark was one of them. And at the end of it, Mark was saying something like, "Oh, I have to take this crazy drive back to whatever. I have to get a lift." And it's like, "Oh, I'll just drive you. I'm going that way anyways." And so while we're driving and talking, I just thought he was a nice guy. I didn't know who he was. We're just like talking and having a good chat. And at some point, he was like, "Hey, so do you like Mass Effect?" And the funny thing is I love Mass Effect 1 and 2, and I have very strong feelings about Mass Effect 3. And so I went into like this really massive tirade about how much I hated the story of Mass Effect 3 and how it ended and everything else. And he was like, "Oh," he's like, "Well, I worked on it." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Like, what'd you do? Like, art design or whatever or something like that?" And he's like, No, I was Commander Shepard." And I was like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, man." I had no idea. So I'm sitting here just like crapping on the story for the third one. And he's like, "It's okay. I didn't write it. So you're making fun of my friends." And I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm sorry."
He also did a bunch of stuff in like the Neverwinters games as well, and that's where Ted kind of knew his work from.
Yeah, when he said he wanted to work on this, I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Really? You want to be on my dumb little thing?" But I mean, he does such an amazing job in this. Like a couple people who heard advanced things from it. Heard him in it, they're like, "Oh my god, he comes across so creepy in this." So a little bit of spoiler: he plays the villain. Mark voices the primary antagonist of the story, and he does an amazing job. If you've heard his vampire work, he did Vampire the Masquerade. His character is very similar to that character, or at least sounds very similar to that character.
Yeah, he at D&D in the Castle. He showed up as like a lich or something. He had like the full costume and totally gets into it. So
Yeah.
Dave in the chat has a great idea. Have you ever thought about putting together a D&D one-shot stream with the cast from the audiobook?
I would love it. I mean,
Most of them play D&D, I'm sure. I don't know if
yeah.
they all do though.
So not all of them do. I know that Witten doesn't play D&D. So let's actually. I'm going to go down the list. I know that Bonnie plays D&D. I think Becca plays D&D. She plays a lot of games. Mark
Mark.
definitely plays D&D. Thomas, I think, doesn't. Joseph definitely does. And Lauren has actually expressed interest. She said she would play with me, so that's good. And Kevin, I actually don't know if Kevin does. Kevin's really kind of a cool, goofy guy. I love him to death. He's an amazing actor. He likes some of the nerd stuff, but I don't know if he likes all the nerd stuff. So that'll be good. I'd ask him. He's a big Doctor Who fan, but he's also a big wrestling fan. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you if he plays D&D or not.
You're halfway there, man. You're halfway there. That would be an interesting promo at any rate.
I would love to convince everybody. I'm like, hey, can I get you in for like a one shot? Can I get you in for like one day? That might be fun.
Yeah, pre-gen characters, maybe the characters from the books. Yeah, 5e's fairly simplistic as far as D&D goes. It's not too bad.
Maybe if we did it like for charity or something, they might be able to get everybody on.
Oh, there you go. Yes,
okay, we're gonna do it.
We're about to start up a couple of new games, and I'm getting my wife into them to play, and she's super nervous, especially because we might play a game that she doesn't know. And she hates asking questions and not knowing how to do things. I'm like, we're here to have fun. Don't worry about it. But everyone has their thing.
I think in one of the pieces of advice I'll give to like new players who don't know how to do things. I'm like, just tell me what you want to do, and we'll figure it out.
Perfect. That's the best advice. Like that's even what I said. Look, you don't need to know how things work. Just say what you want to do, and then whoever's running the game will tell you what to roll.
Yeah.
And we'll meet in the middle somewheres.
Yeah, and also go like a little lenient too. If like they're like, I have like this crazy thing I want to do.
I love
like,
crazy things.
So actually, somebody we were talking about earlier gave a really good piece of advice, which was, or gave a really good comment was. So we're talking about before the stream, we're talking about XP to level 3. Jacob.
Yeah.
He has some really good videos, and one of the ones that he had was he was talking about, how getting mad in D&D is dumb. He's like, don't get mad at the game. And he was like, sometimes you'll have this character who wants to do this crazy plan. They want to jump off a balcony and grab a chandelier and do a backflip and then stab the guy. And sometimes they'll successfully jump off the balcony, grab the chandelier, do the backflip, and then land on their ass. And like, that is just as fun as successfully stabbing the thing, because that's still a moment. It's still a comedic moment. I mean, even if you don't succeed, you can still tell the story there. Your characters don't have to always be successful. So I mean, even if you have your character do something, if the player wants something that they don't know how to do, and they get this idea, and the roles don't work out, still make it fun for them. Still make it interesting and exciting.
Yeah.
You did this, but here's what happened, and make it cinematic.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like people get hung up on like winning D&D. That's what I kind of like attribute that to. Like they don't get like the fun stuff isn't like this thing you had in your head or something that would happen in a movie or a book. The fun stuff is when you try to do the thing, and then the dice intervene and do something differently. And that's part of the game. Like the dice are another player at the table, and you got to give them their space. That randomness of you like you said, I'm going to try and do this series of things, but then you roll poorly and you land on your ass instead. It's just part of the game, and they're the stories that people remember. Like believe it or not, like they think this cool idea they had, that if they had executed it perfectly, like, no, it would just be a thing that happened in the game and no one will think twice about it. But then, 10 years from now, if you try and do the thing and something ridiculous happens, that's the story people will be telling.
Yeah, I think that some of my most fun moments from games have been where things did not go according to plan, and we all very nearly died, but managed to succeed because we got clever or lucky or whatever it was at the end. Like there was one game I had where, and this is a bit obnoxious, but I was like playing a chaotic good rogue, and they worship Tamora because the DM was like, everyone has to have a deity they serve, and I was like, okay, praise Tamora, and goddess of basically risk taking idiots. And we went through like this whole dungeon, and we all got beat up, and people were like using up all their spells and everything else. And we get to the end, and there's like this fairly young dragon. We're also low level too. There's like a young dragon that is like in like this back room, and the dragon is asleep, and the guards don't notice this. And I sneak up there myself, and I'm like, "Hey, here's what I saw," and everyone is like, "Oh, no, we need to go back to town and heal, and we're gonna die," and like that's, and I'm like, "Yeah, but I think I'm actually gonna take the risk here because praise Tamora," and I started the fight, and we managed to scrape through it, and it was an exciting. Like everyone was freaked out. They're like, "Oh my god, how are we going to do this?" But because of the fact that we were going in, half strength, and we shouldn't have been there, made it far more exciting. And that's one of the highlights of that particular campaign was going through and doing the thing and trying our best and managing to succeed. And actually, what's funny is we actually made friends with the dragon, and later on the mom dragon got pissed at us, but like the kid dragon was like our friend, and it was like it actually led to like a whole other story, and it was pretty cool.
The teenage rebellious dragon. Uh,
Yeah.
we are up on time, so we're gonna have to head on out of here. Before we go, final thoughts, final words.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show. If anyone wants to read the series, here I will show you real quick in succession. Book 1, Book 2, Book 3. They're good, I promise, or at least you'll like them. I don't know. Dave, you're amazing. I love your channel. I love all your D&D thoughts. And again, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. It's always a pleasure to chat. And everyone else, till next time, stay nerdy.
Nerdy.